All right, this is Brent Porcio at TopVelocity.net. We're here today with some fun. This will be an entertaining show. We've got some guys that are experienced, and of course, we got Zinger here, who's a minor league pitcher, sidearm guy, which is what we're going to focus on today in this little interview. We also got Brad. I don't know, what's your last name, Brad?
Rayo.
Leo?
Rayo, R-A-O, Rayo.
Yeah. Oh, Rayo.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
Brad
Tell me
Rayo.
about yourself.
Oh, sure. I come from a corrective structural procedural end here. We're looking at the Zinger. So you're talking clinical biomechanics. And then I'm looking at, wow, joints are all floating in here, coming from a back pain and a spinal rehab thing going, wow, there's a lot of joints floating in the kinetic delivery of the pitcher. Swirling vortexes and flow patterns in each side, each joint. So I come from, wow, now the mind is directing the movement of this kinetic genius, and this energy somehow moving the body towards the plate. And so I'm kind of thinking in Zinger's, I'm Team Zinger, part of Team Zinger, spiritualist, mechanic. There we go.
That's right, brother. That's right.
Cool. Well, but we're both into biomechanics and basically the total package of pitching. And Zinger, of course, you're coming from still being a player, experienced player, and still very successful at what you do. And I wanted to kind of focus on some of what you can bring to the community, Top Velocity, and just talk about, what you do as a sidearm pitcher, or I guess, would you classify yourself as sidearm or more submarine?
Yeah, I would say more sidearm. I've yet to go any lower. I guess for me, my main focus is that I keep my head still, and then I kind of just ending up where I was at.
Yeah, and like it's a challenge, and we were talking about that. We were before I started the interview, we were talking about the challenges it is of those arm slots to generate velocity. Based on my research and beliefs with 3X pitching, I believe hip to shoulder separation is really key for a pitcher to generate, high velocities, because that's where we take that linear power through the stride, those ground reaction forces, and that's where we convert it to torque, which allows us to move that energy up the kinetic chain. And sidearm sub guys, because they're trying to get their shoulders down or tilted inward, they're, so during their strides, they're starting to tilt inward, and ultimately, I'm training high-velocity guys to almost do the opposite, to start to tilt back, to put the throwing shoulder in position to basically react into a lot of hip-shoulder separation. So the challenge is when I'm trying to work with sidearm guys, which really isn't my expertise like yours, is trying to teach them how you need to still try to get in position to react and create that hip shoulder separation, but also you still want to get to that arm slot position. So what do you feel like on those, because you said you were an upper 90s guy when you were, I think you're still close. What do you remember when you were just really popping the mitt? What was working really well?
I had topped out this past season at 94, but really was pitching about 88 to 92. But still looking to get back to those higher velocities that I was at. Now, one of the main ways that I do that is the way that I start. So as far as my load, I like to keep my feet pretty close together, and I like to almost turn as if I have a bat in my hands. So I'm turning my shoulders a little. I'm creating a little bit of torque before I even start. And then ideally, I like to just lift and go as fast as I can towards my target. And kind of like we had talked about a little bit earlier with some of those Korean throwers you'd seen, wait as long as I can to lower the shoulders and get that little bit of extra whatever to create that angle that I create with the sink.
Yeah, and so, and what have you done as far as to enhance that? What do you feel has been effective training-wise to enhance that and help you achieve, be able to get more torque.
Yes, I think right on. A lot of the stuff that helped me, I've read pretty much anything that's out there pitching-wise. I've been doing this for a while, so it's been something that I've covered over and over and over, and when I ran into your stuff, I just loved it. Especially, probably my favorite thing is how you broke the delivery down into two pieces, where first you land and then you throw. And that's so key for me, especially with my movement, where if I throw before I land, I cast the ball. And the hitters can see the movement that comes in there, and it's just it's a flat movement that probably high school guys could hit. But if I land and keep that all the way and then throw, that's when I create that late sink that's kept me in the game as long as it has.
Well, good. Well, Brad, where do you come to this? I know you work with Zinger. I mean, have you spent a lot of time working with him?
Fortunate enough to meet Zinger. I guess he's coming off a little bit of, he's starting some rehab or just about to throw. Again, in 2009, after some type, not some type of a surgery, rehabilitation process. And so I just wanted to throw too. I wanted to throw in the 90s just because I think it's fun to, as a pitcher, what you want to get off the field and get the guys back out there hitting again. And so I met Zinger throwing a baseball, but coming obviously to help him because I loved his mind, his attitude, and that raw natural ability to want to wake up every day and throw and apply that to human beings on a baseball field. I was like, wow, I was drawn to Zinger as a being. And, not throwing as much as I would be out here in the Northeast. However, I'm really in Team Zinger's, corner here, helping from a joints that are supposed to float. I think levity is throw that in there because the Zinger's been training very hard, high volume for a long time, and we're coming from a chi perspective more than ever now, where making the whole kinetic chain talk as one big voice. So the ankle and the wrist are in the same. So quieting the body down and allowing the transference of any interaction, all of these subtle intelligences, to respond to like an Aroldis Chapman would, sort of stacking the cards in our favor, we would, Brent, start applying ancient Chinese wisdom, medicine wisdoms. Zinger's great for, he's really big into believing in, super herbal teas and stuff like that, which will allow really building up the reserves, because as we get older as athletes, building up a deep well reserve, a Jing it's called, in ancient medicine, the power to light the flame, which is the chi that would come off of that. The Zinger's really big into performance nutrition from that standpoint. So he calls me up and I'm ready to go with helping on my end, Brent, orbital spin and angular momentum of joints, relative timing of 206 joints in the pitching vessel known as my buddy Zinger.
Well, and I think, Brent, too, part of the stuff with Brad is he really opened my eyes to the human potential and showed me things that maybe before were limitations by my thoughts, and he basically erased those and took the limits off, which, that's why when it comes to the increasing velocity and the top velocity, I just love your approach and how much you've been helping guys, because I think you're able to open people's minds just as much as opening up their potential to, either playing in high school or playing in college or even playing pro ball. Because, let's face it, 3 to 5 miles an hour can change somebody's life. So I think it's just an awesome thing.
I think you guys are right. I think you guys are right. There's many different ways we can ultimately give or open up the mind to, the potential that it ultimately possesses. And you can do that by convincing it many different ways. You can do that by kind of just connecting with yourself more and using some Eastern approaches like what you guys are talking about and I've experienced as well. And also science. I love science because people, I don't know what it is. I don't know, as Westerners, we love it. The point is, if you show us scientifically that something is possible, we believe it. And so therefore we accept it, and therefore now we have more potential to achieve it. So I think, there's it's critical to velocity is ultimately the mentality that you take. I mean, if you have all the tools but you don't have the mentality, you're going to fail every time, even though you have the tools. So I mean that is that is critical. I mean, and ultimately knowing you, Zinger, someone who's played this long and this high level of the game, you know how important that is as well. I mean, you want to elaborate any more on the mentality of it?
Well, I mean, I think the funny thing is, too, is I feel like I'm just getting started. And I think when people hear me say that, they think I'm crazy. I've been playing since 2002. And honestly, with the new information and the new stuff that's out there, like you're talking with science, we know how the human body reacts at a cellular level to both pitching and also to certain foods that help you recover. So that's a whole other category for that.
And Brent, you would agree that, I'm sorry, Zing, we'll get right back to you. Pitching is all about trauma healing. To throw the amount of pitches, to talk about the Zinger is a specific guy, because you start throwing corners around at 92 at late sink and stuff. Right-handed batters get out at the major league level. Heck, lefties do, or whatever, 93. So the Zinger with trauma healing, to be able to throw over and over, a tincture here and an idea there, positive attitude all the time coursing through the blood vessels, all the time, 100%. The blood is always receiving great messages from the hypothalamus, so the hormones and neurotransmitters are cascading through the blood, and the enzyme potential is always there to mimic hormones and do great things right back into the glands, back into the bloodstream, back into the belief vessel.
I think that's a critical point, but I think where you can really, really change the perspective of a young ball player is, make that point. Healing is the key here, but you also have a body that is just unbelievable how it heals, exactly how you were explaining. So therefore, don't baby it. That's my approach. Your body's
totally
give it all the nutrients. Yeah. You need to give it all the things that it needs to heal, but at the same time, don't baby it. Push it, force it to heal, and then watch what happens.
Woo! Yeah. I got the Ferrari sitting in the driveway, but I don't really drive it around or anything. It's just kind of perfectly tuned to do everything.
Well, and then Brent, that's kind of, I know that Brad's right on with that approach, and as well am I. When he was living with me, he would wake me up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and we did a Tai Chi exercise called side to sides. And the exercise starts at 30 minutes. And it's a grueler, but, basically throughout my career, I've always looked at it like a bank account, where the more I put in, the more I can expect to get out. Whether that's being able to look at myself in the mirror and know I did everything it took, or, standing on a mound and having that same feeling with a batter in a box, where there's no way this guy has done what I've done to prepare, and that gives, I think, a mental edge to your prepared, athletes. Like you talk about, you have to make an athlete first before you have an athletic thrower. You don't just all of a sudden have an athletic thrower. You have an athlete first, and then they progress. And that's where some of the stuff with Brad here as well. He taught me some of the movement pattern stuff that were downloaded from an early age. And some of us would beat ourselves up for maybe being a bad athlete, where there's a lot of potential, once again, in all of us. The human potential is so great that, if we realize we can step outside of our genetics, if you will, and go into the epigenetic potential of all of us, it's outstanding.
Yeah, and I like to always separate it, to understand where we're training. We're either training, the mentality, really the mind, the spiritual connection, and then we're training, even into the body. We got to break it up. We're either training the central nervous system, the energy systems, or the the motor units and the muscles. So, I think I've learned, and I feel like you can ultimately, you just need to make sure that you are prioritizing which ones are more important for you, focusing there, which ultimately where you maybe have some weaknesses, but at the same time also spending time on your strengths and making them even stronger. But being able to make sure you're hitting all those things. If you're spending all your time just doing the mentality or the mental game, you're going to see benefit, but not ultimately as much as if you were at the same time putting in time into training, your your body's ability to activate more motor units or motor control. Controlling those movements as well. I mean, so I like to make sure that the athlete understands. Okay, what are we actually training here? So we don't constantly just do the same thing over and over again, feeling like we're doing different things. So I think, if you only have so much time to play this game, it's making sure that you're prioritizing and you've got a good strategy. You have a good system in play to ultimately give you the best result. And I think a lot of guys just kind of go into it blind, naive, and uneducated. And it's kind of like money. I mean, if you want to make more money and you just think, well, I just got to put my heart into it, and you just, this is something you like, and you start throwing your money at it. I mean, for you to expect a return is kind of ridiculous. Ultimately, money is math. If you don't know the math, if you don't have the analytics, you don't know how it works. I mean, it doesn't matter how big your heart is, you're going to fail, So it's just like, I like being smart as well, trying to be as smart as I can, but also making sure I still have my heart in it,
Absolutely. It's a balance thing, right, with everything.
Yeah, and I think that's where Brad and I haven't, his trainers now, I mean, that's mainly what I do. We have a lot in common is our beliefs in the kinetic chain, like you said, Brad, our beliefs in, I mean, obviously, I don't even, probably should talk about it more, is in Olympic lifts. I mean, I'm a big believer in Olympic lifts just because it allows us to, it's one of the, I think it's really the only lifts in the weight room that you can apply heavy loads and use the entire kinetic chain to move it. What do you think?
You're talking about recruiting motor units and exciting cell bodies, neural bodies. Everything. You almost get the idea of it sometimes, you would think, too, to really pull off to do it, right? Yeah. At the level of a neurologist Chapman getting major league batters, you're talking about the only lift in the gym that's probably as highly taxing, right? The only thing it can do, the two Olympic lifts most tax the nervous system, the overall being. Oh, it just happens to be once the kinetic chain to the utmost, 3x. If you look at the neural profile, what happens there? This is a near-death experience. If you think about it, if you said the snatch goes wrong, that stuff falls on those guys' heads. Right? So versus just whatever, a pull-up or something, the body's not really, the neuroplasticity at the motor unit level isn't there. However, it is there with the Olympic lifts, of course.
That's a great point.
Yeah, and the problem is it's a scary, most pitchers, coaches that don't know much about it, because of what you said, the, intensity of it, the complexity of it.
A highly qualified coach like yourself, Brent, so therefore you have to have a really good coach. I'm not certified, so I just play around on my own body, and I just go, wow, as a biomechanic, I'm whoa. So to have a coach like yourself, Brent, and putting great information out there, I think of it as an amazing assembly line because the creator made pitches, and you're just making sure the kinetic chain. It's like Henry Ford didn't create the car, he invented the assembly line. We didn't create pitchers or the good game of baseball, but we have the duty to help and empower people to make sure that the bio vessel can,
Yeah, I mean, there's as much technique in the Olympic lifts as there is in the pitching mechanics. I mean, to me, I can spend as much time coaching the mechanics of the lifts as I do, coaching a pitcher on the mound. I mean, but that's important too because that's what your point you're making is if you truly understand or you have a coach who can help you understand the technique of these movements, then you're going to be in a safer environment, and ultimately you'll be able to push your potential even higher. And that's the cool thing about that is that's the exact same approach to a high-velocity pitcher. If you know the movements better and you understand them better, then ultimately you can push your potential higher with less chance of injury. And that's why I love them. They both kind of go hand in hand,
Yes. Would you say the snatch is obviously would be the creme, the world creme because of the force velocity curve? There's more velocity there than the clean more on the force end.
Yeah, and I don't teach the snatch to a beginner lifter or a beginner pitcher. Snatch is something I would incorporate way later on because of the shoulder stability that is required. But so I mostly stay in the cleans, but with my more advanced guys, I will bring in the snatch. I mean, as far as the power output of those lifts, they're pretty much the same. I mean, they're almost identical. They both produce about 5,500 watts of power per.
Yeah, good point.
Body weight. Yeah, and that's what I think is another, as far as the science of those lifts. The Olympic lifts, the cleans, I think it's the second clean, basically the below the knee and up, produces that 5,500 watts. The closest lift to that is a squat or a deadlift, and those are around 1,200. So it's a far superior lift. 1,200. So the squat deadlift produces about 1,200 watts, and the second clean produces about 5,500. So you're pushing. You're so much more, 5 times more ground reaction forces, or force into the ground through an Olympic clean. And that's, to me, why it's a superior lift. Now, it's not saying I believe that's the only lift you do. I believe you want to build a good strength base, because potentially science, research shows that you can increase your power production through having first a good strength base. I'm a big believer in even, in squats and all other things that develop good leg strength. But ultimately, I want to get you good at an Olympic lift. I want to get a good strength to weight, power to weight ratio there, because, like I said, it's a highly complex, explosive movement through using the entire kinetic chain, which is to me, the closest you're going to get in the weight room to pitching delivery, to a high velocity pitching delivery.
Well, we want to spend our time doing, it's the SAID principle. We want to spend our time doing things that are going to give us, So the zinger, and this translates, he tackles cleans and he tackles the snatch even. The snatch would be, obviously, if he's playing with that, where his delivery is, it'd be a sidearm guy. He'd be developing an amazing power profile with the lifts. However, throwing the way he does, would it be a nice translation into the throw to him? Would he benefit as much?
Yeah, I think he would, because all the research shows that all high velocity pitchers get their energy through their strides. So anything for him really, any strength, power focused training on the lower half, which I believe are going to be most effective, with heavier loads, because we can activate more motor units, is going to benefit him. It's going to benefit any pitcher. It's just the challenge for him is the conversion of that power through the stride into the upper kinetic chain. It's trying to make sure,
right?
Yeah, because your posture, it's hard for you to keep your torso vertical. Because think about when you're twisting something, it's better twisting it when it's erect, not when it's curled over. It's going to tighten up more. So that's the challenge with you. It's like, if you can build your power in that linear direction, zinger, and then allow it to convert in a it's a quick moment of conversion as the torso rotates. But you need to be vertical, and then when you start to throw, then you can make sure you got more into whatever position for your shoulders for your arm slot. But that's the key point right there if you want to convert it all, and that's ultimately going to help you on velocity.
What if you do some super late, nasty sidearm, like you're all, hey, vertical, front, then just drop down real quick in a nanosecond because of all this power you've got, and just do it from there, Zing. That seems to be an option too, right?
Well,
ninja.
If you look at, if we look at Chapman, his stride takes about 0.67 seconds. And then once his arm is cocked up and then starts to throw, that takes about 0.15 seconds. So
you're talking about class hands, like the hand speed, yeah.
Yeah, when the arm accelerates, when the arm starts to roll back and accelerate, that's about 0.15 seconds. So you can see how you're spending most of the time building the stride converting it,
Mm-hmm.
and then once you've done it, then it just takes off from there. It's pretty much done at that point. Zinger, I mean, how do you feel as far as, what you've, I guess, hearing this kind of approach, you incorporate a lot of it already, but, do you feel like there's anything different out of kind of what I've been preaching to you, I guess, lately, that you haven't been doing?
Probably the biggest thing is the progression, which I think is very key. It's making sure you, once again, get with the right coach, and then progress as you go.
Right. I would ultimately like to see you. That's where I'm really motivated, and Brad, I'd be motivated to see him, maybe try to learn the techniques of those Olympic lifts a little bit better, so he can start applying some heavy loads. Just because things change, your technique changes when you do heavier stuff, because your arms ultimately, what starts to happen is your arms can't get involved as much. When you're doing a light, dumbbell or a kettlebell when you're, simulating, say, a clean or a snatch, it's because of the lighter weight, your arms can take over and get involved. And when you apply heavy loads in a heavy clean, something over your body weight, that ultimately goes out the window just because you can't even move something over your body weight, by curling your arms. But that would be key. I would like to see that with Zinger, see how that would start to change his lower body power. Also, mechanically, you change too on the mound, because you start developing this motor coordination to where the legs power and the arms pretty much just support or follow. And I think that's, priceless for a pitcher, because ultimately that's what high velocity pitchers do. Their arms, the arms get involved later, and therefore are more reactive to the lower body and the energy from the lower body. But I know that's a challenge, Zinger, but that would be my goal for you, is to see you start to learn how to do some a little bit heavier loads with the Olympic stuff, and seeing how that changes kind of your DNA.
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, I'm excited to see how that goes too. And I've been steadily increasing the weight as we go here. So
now, would you say we could ever say, if I had two, I have dumbbells. You have two dumbbells, because Brent, the whole idea is, say, determining whether something is we need to do something or it's nice to do something. Now, obviously the barbell is key, but say if I had dumbbells that went up to 100 pounds. You could pull off some cleans and stuff, right? With dumbbells, not really, 100 each in each hand for being a Zinger or something like that, with clean to the shoulder.
Well, I just, when you break your body weight, you're activating more motor units, but ultimately, mechanically, you have to use more big muscle groups. Right. And I like to train. Ultimately, that's what we want to isolate. We want to isolate those big muscle groups and activate as many motor units as we can, because what happens when we do that is we break down more muscle, and this is on the muscular side, which causes or forces the body to produce more hormones to support that muscle. So, someone for Zinger who's moving into his 30s, or you're already in your 30s, that would support growth for him even late in, his young life. And then on top of that, the mechanical changes of you have to be more efficient. It's simple as that. When you move heavier weight, you have to be more efficient.
You have to be spot on. You're very spot on.
Right.
It's great. It's perfect. It's the profile you want if you're facing 3-2 and bases loaded, the Zinger's coming in, it's nothing crazy, It's just the way.
Well, the reason I promote it is because most of the guys that come on my site are guys that genetically don't have, the fast twitch muscle, the lean muscle mass to compete, at a high level. Now, of course, there's other tools you can use, finesse and stuff like that. But I feel like if you were going to be a high velocity guy and you're not, Zinger's height, which I get a lot of 5, 7 to 6 footers, then they're almost forced to do that, to take that, heavy loads approach. So that's where I am now. Because I'm working with the guy who plays for the Orioles right now. He tore his rotator cuff, and he's rehabbing with me. I already know this guy's a 90-mile-an-hour guy, so I'm not going to apply a lot of heavy loads. I'm initially going to apply heavy loads because his legs have completely weakened since surgery, and I'm going to get that back. But once I get him back to his athletic peak, then I'm going to just focus on more, just ultimately motor coordination around these mechanics and just helping him be able to create these movements. Now, if I see a lack of strength anywhere in the delivery, I'm going to then use some heavy loads to solve that issue. So ultimately, I use the strength training or the heavy loads to help guys who have serious power issues in their delivery.
Fantastic. So, Zinger, we'll just have, just spend some time with Brent. It seems to be the most obvious. Brent, you're a former pitcher and then also obviously strength coach friend, an Olympic coach. So
it'd be fun to get all three of us together in person. That would be ideal.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I need to come out to Arizona.
Yeah, that's always a great idea. What happens with me, Brent, to say the thing is stuff, if I was there, stuff would come up like out of his body. One thing like, the talofibril joints and whatever, and you get there, you apply some friction strategies, something like that, and then Zinger, okay, go do another lift. Because as we find, right, Brent, older in your pitching career, if you're taking on the Olympic lifting, when you've been throwing the ball one-sided for so long, sometimes it's more challenging, right, if you're 30 years old picking this up versus 14.
Yeah, I mean, you have a lot of old motor engrams. I call them motor engrams, just old ways of doing things that are sitting in your cerebral cortex. I mean, and we ultimately
just hanging out there and right there.
Yeah. I don't believe that you can delete old motor coordination. I believe it's there forever. I believe you ultimately just have to.
What about fascial components?
More dominant.
Oh, okay. I agree with that. So I'm thinking on my end, I'm like, okay, how do we maximize this on working tissues? Because I know that there's been restrictions because the person hasn't been operating their body at the level that we're talking about, and they've been throwing it and getting results. There's going to be fascial lockdowns to movement. I got to release restrictions, right? That's all I'm thinking, joint restrictions and how the fascia is
in the older pitcher.
Right. An older pitcher who's starting because what's that?
But strength you can solve those tissue issues through strength and through, massage and release. But the key would be, it's just every athlete's different. You would assess the older athlete. Say if he had a loss of range of motion in his elbow extension, that'll be helping with some of those, that releasing some of that tissue, but also at the same time strengthening some of the protagonist muscles that have more than likely gone weak. So, yeah, I just look at the athlete and ultimately take both of those approaches. I mean, we have to, as being a good strength coach or being a good a trainer is we have to use all those techniques as to really support the athlete, and then the aging athlete, it's more important just because they tend to have more issues.
Well, right. So you got a sidearm Zinger. And here we go, man. You got to start pulling off some snatches. It'd be really cool right now, so you can get Yankees out and stuff like that.
Yeah.
There's more, I guess, need for tools, ratchets and stuff like that.
Think with what you said there, Brent, I have experienced that with my wrist and my elbow once I've started to increase the loads. Where my arm, it's almost like, for years the doctors tried to straighten it from the elbow joint. When I met Brad, he started to get into where the arm attached. We started to do some other stuff. But with what you said about the heavy loads in the joints, I had certain places in my wrist and my elbow that were what I would say weak, and they needed to get that strength back, maybe that either back or in there for the first time.
Yeah, most most of I get a lot of the young kids that do with the older guys. When we do any cleans where your arms are wrapped and flexed under the bar, you're pushing your wrist into hyperextension or flexion, and it ultimately the kids get pain and discomfort, and that's what scares them from wanting to do this, because they don't want to feel that specifically in their throwing arm. But I try to tell them that is a mobility issue. It's both a flexibility and a strength issue. You don't have this flexibility, and ultimately that's because you don't have the strength and you don't have the tendon strength. So, yeah, I feel like as pitchers, it's conventional not to see ourselves as athletes. So we tend not to train as athletes all the time or through our adult, as we grow. And we have a lot of these issues. Most pitchers have a lot of joint laxity that I feel shouldn't exist. I've heard trainers talk about it like it's a handicap. And I'm like, why should we accept that as a handicap? That's just the lack of education we've had in this sport for this long, that we have all these pitchers with too much joint laxity, because I don't think that's a great thing. I think it's a constant battle between flexibility and strength. You don't want too much flexibility. I wouldn't even say you wouldn't want too much strength. You do want too much strength. You just don't want that. You don't want the loss of flexibility with that strength. So that's the battle there.
That's a great point. That's a great